Vector graphics, on the other hand, use complex mathematical formulas to draw from one point to another, which is recalculated every time you mess with the vector. Vector graphics are infinitely scalable because of how they are defined mathematically, while raster graphics, because they are defined pixel by pixel, will get blurrier every time you scale them, as they essentially have to guess what the extra pixels will be using the pixels from before you scaled it. With that basic difference out of the way, we are now able to discuss image resolution. Image resolution is determined by the amount of pixels wide times the amount of pixels high, in that order. Many standard resolution sizes only specify the height and use the p suffix after the height number. For example, 720p is standard definition for YouTube videos, while 1080p is high definition for YouTube videos. To change the image resolution in Photoshop, click Image and then Image Size, and a pop-up box will appear. And in GIMP, you should click Image and then Canvas Size to get a similar pop-up. Much like the select tools earlier, you can click on the link to make the proportions stay the same. On the GIMP version, there are also extra features besides changing the dimensions, such as specifying the measurement of the dimensions to be something other than pixels, although pixels are how computers render graphics, so we generally shouldn't change them. Offset, which allows you to move the image on the x-axis or the y-axis if you make the dimensions smaller. There is a center button to reset the offsize to 0. Layers, which determines what type of layers in the image you want to reset. Layers, which determines which type of layers in the image you want to resize. Fill width, which determines what to fill empty space with if you make the image larger than what it already is. And a checkbox to determine whether text layers are resized or not. Like so. Now that we've discussed how to change the image resolution manually, we can move on to the crop tool. The crop tool works almost exactly like the rectangular select tool, except it only allows you to make a hard or edge rectangle. It does not allow you to feather edges or round corners. It allows you to limit it to the current layer only, whereas the rectangle select will always select the entire image, and allows you to move the tool outside the image, causing it to grow with the Allow Growing checkbox. Once you have made your selection, it will automatically resize the image for you to that selection. Like so. Now with the Allow Growing featured in demonstration. Now that we have gone over how the cropping tool works, we can discuss the basic transforms. If you are using Photoshop, you must select an area first, and then click Edit and Transform. Although there are many transformation options, we will stick with Rotate, Scale, Move, and Skew. The other transforms are more advanced and will be saved for the next video. Although there may be no explicit tool, on Windows you can hold Ctrl and hit T, or on Mac the Action key and hit T. and all three basic transforms will be given to you at once. Notice how when you either click on one of the options or hit Ctrl-T to bring up all three at once, a rectangle with 8 yellow squares, 4 for the corners and 4 for the midpoints between the corners, will appear around your selected area, despite the actual shape of the selection. This is because vectors are usually straight lines, so it would be more time and processor intensive to use multiple vectors to try to simulate rounded shapes. The squares in the rectangle represent the start and end points of all the vectors, and the white lines in between these represent the length of the vectors. If you select scale, the rectangle's points should all move in and out as you select and drag one of them. Note that because you are transforming raster images, they will become blurry if you scale them too far out. If you select rotate, all of the endpoints should rotate by an equal amount as you click and drag one of them. If you select move, you click the area in between all the edges, aka the inner area of the selection, and you should be able to move it around the screen. Skew, while still very basic, is the most complicated of all these options. It allows you to click and drag only by the endpoints. It allows you to click and drag only by the edges rather than the endpoints. This makes a parallelogram shape rather than a pure rectangle shape. The image will end up looking skewed in the direction of the outermost point, as the title of the transform suggests. If you instead accessed all of these options by holding Ctrl and hitting T, dragging the area by the endpoints will scale it. Being outside the selection and diagonally from an endpoint will allow you to rotate it. Moving the cursor in a straight line from one of the edges will allow you to skew it. And moving the cursor inside the selection will allow you to move it. If you use GIMP, there is no Ctrl-T method, and so you will have to move, rotate, scale, and skew your image using individual tools. They work the same way as in Photoshop, but this time each tool has an individual pop-up window, in addition to the vector rectangle. You can use either method, whichever one is convenient to you. When scaling, you can choose to link the proportions 1:1 to make the image even as you scale it. And when rotating, you can choose the reference point to rotate around. Neither of these options were given to you in Photoshop. The skew feature has no additional features in GIMP versus Photoshop, although in GIMP it is called shear instead. One final basic transform that GIMP has is the flip tool, which is a basic horizontal or vertical flip around the center of the rectangle, and you can easily change between these two. Move tool in action. Rotate tool in action. Scale tool in action. Shear tool in action. Flip tool in action. There is also an align tool, which allows you to determine how the layers align with each other, but because you can use the basic transforms to line the layers up manually, we do not need much use of it. Join me in next week's tutorial, where we will learn about the warp transform, the liquefy transform, and other transforms, and how they are all related.
Don't forget to subscribe if you found this video informative, and make sure to visit the other tutorial videos, and follow me on either Facebook or Twitter for more content.